I thought Muhammad Ali was just another old boxer trying to steal my spotlight. But what happened that night in 1988 shattered everything I believed about him. These were the words that would haunt Mike Tyson for years, words spoken in anger during the height of his dominance when he was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. At just 22 years old, Tyson was destroying every opponent in his path, and in his mind, Muhammad Ali was nothing more than a relic from the past, desperately clinging to relevance. The young champion had convinced himself that Ali's legendary status was overrated, that his own raw power and intimidating presence had already surpassed anything the greatest had ever accomplished. The tension between these two boxing legends had been brewing for months, fueled by media comparisons and Tyson's growing resentment toward the man everyone called the greatest heavyweight of all time. Every interview seemed to include questions about Ali. Every victory was measured against Ali's legacy. And every time Tyson heard that name, his jaw would clench with barely contained fury. He felt like he was living in Ali's shadow, despite being the most feared fighter on the planet. The breaking point came during a press conference in Atlantic City, where a reporter asked Tyson about Ali's recent comments, suggesting that the young champion lacked the heart and soul that defined true greatness. Tyson's response was swift and brutal, his words cutting through the air like the punches that had made him famous. He declared that Ali was a has-been, a man whose time had passed, and that he would never forgive him for trying to diminish his achievements. The room fell silent as Tyson's rage filled every corner, his eyes burning with the intensity that had terrified countless opponents in the ring. Hey, my friends. Help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Don't forget to click that hype button. It's super important because it helps the channel deliver content to more people. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth. But what Tyson didn't know was that Muhammad Ali had been watching that press conference from his home in Michigan, his hands already beginning to show the early tremors that would later be diagnosed as Parkinson's disease. Ali's wife Lonnie sat beside him as they watched the young champion's angry words, and she could see the pain in her husband's eyes. Not pain from the insults, but pain for a young man who seemed to be carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, just as Ali had once done. The boxing world was divided. Some supported Tyson's aggressive stance, believing that every new champion had the right to forge his own path without constantly being compared to the past. Others were shocked by the disrespect shown to a man who had transcended boxing to become a global icon for courage and conviction. The media sensationalized the conflict, turning it into a generational war between the old guard and the new breed of fighters. Tyson's training camp became even more intense as he prepared for his next fight, channeling his anger toward Ali into devastating combinations on the heavy bag. His trainer Kevin Rooney watched with concern as the young champion's fury seemed to consume him. The gym echoed with the thunderous sounds of Tyson's punches, each one seemingly aimed at erasing the legacy of the man he now considered his greatest enemy, even though they had never faced each other in the ring. Meanwhile, Ali continued his quiet life, making occasional public appearances despite his declining health. Those close to him noticed that he seemed more reflective than usual, often asking about Tyson's upcoming fights and commenting on the young man's incredible talent. When friends suggested that he should respond to Tyson's harsh words, Ali would simply shake his head and smile, that same mysterious smile that had captivated the world for decades. The boxing community waited with bated breath for Ali's response, expecting a war of words that would dominate headlines for weeks. Sports journalists camped outside Ali's home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the former champion or a comment about the brewing feud. But Ali remained silent, his silence speaking louder than any words could have. This only seemed to frustrate Tyson more, who interpreted the lack of response as arrogance, as if Ali considered him beneath a reply. As weeks turned into months, Tyson's resentment grew deeper. He began studying old footage of Ali's fights, not to learn from them, but to find flaws and weaknesses that he could use to support his argument that Ali was overrated. He watched the famous battles with Frazier, Foreman, and Norton, his critical eye searching for moments of vulnerability that others had missed. But with each viewing, something unexpected began to happen. He started to see the artistry, the intelligence, and the heart that had made Ali special. The young champion tried to push these thoughts away, reminding himself of the disrespect he felt Ali had shown him. He surrounded himself with people who reinforced his anger, who told him that he was right to feel slighted and that Ali was indeed trying to steal his thunder. But late at night, alone in his mansion, Tyson would sometimes find himself thinking about Ali's words, wondering if there was truth hidden beneath what he perceived as criticism. The tension reached its peak when Tyson was scheduled to fight Michael Spinks in what would become one of the most anticipated heavyweight bouts in years. The fight was being billed as a chance for Tyson to prove once and for all that he was the greatest heavyweight of all time, surpassing even Ali's legendary status. The pressure was immense, and Tyson felt the weight of expectations from fans, promoters, and critics who wanted to see if he could live up to the comparisons with Ali. During the final press conference before the Spinks fight, a reporter asked Tyson directly about Ali's legacy and whether he felt any respect for the former champion. Tyson's answer was cold and definitive. He stated that Ali's time was over, that the sport had evolved beyond what Ali represented, and that he would never forgive the man for trying to undermine his achievements. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the room knew that this feud had reached a point of no return. What nobody knew was that Ali had been following Tyson's career more closely than anyone realized. Despite his public silence, he had been studying the young champion's fights, analyzing his technique, and recognizing the raw talent that reminded him of his own younger days. Ali saw something in Tyson that others missed, a vulnerability hidden beneath the intimidating exterior, a young man struggling with the same pressures and expectations that Ali himself had faced decades earlier. The night before the Spinks fight, Tyson was in his hotel room, unable to sleep despite his usual pre-fight routine. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as he realized that this fight would define his legacy. Win, and he would cement his place as the undisputed king of heavyweight boxing. Lose, and all his talk about surpassing Ali would seem like empty boasting. The irony wasn't lost on him that even in his moment of greatest triumph, he was still being measured against the man he claimed to despise. As Tyson stared out at the Atlantic City skyline, his mind wandered to thoughts of Ali, and for the first time, he wondered if his anger was really about respect, or if it was about something deeper. Fear. Fear that no matter what he accomplished, he would always be compared to a man whose impact on the sport transcended wins and losses. Fear that his own legacy would be forever linked to someone he had chosen as an enemy rather than a mentor. The morning of the fight arrived with all the fanfare and media attention that had become synonymous with Tyson's biggest bouts. As he made his way to the arena, Tyson felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried him through so many victories. But there was something different this time. A nagging feeling that this fight was about more than just defeating Michael Spinks. It was about proving something to himself and to the ghost of Ali's legacy that seemed to follow him everywhere. Little did Tyson know that in just a few hours, his world would change in ways he never could have imagined, and that the man he had sworn never to forgive was about to teach him the most important lesson of his life. The stage was set for a confrontation that would go far beyond anything that could happen in a boxing ring. A moment that would force Tyson to confront not just his opponent, but the deepest truths about himself and what it truly meant to be great. The fight against Michael Spinks lasted exactly 91 seconds. Tyson demolished his opponent with such ferocious intensity that the boxing world stood in stunned silence. As Spinks crumpled to the canvas, Tyson raised his arms in victory, his face a mask of pure aggression and triumph. He had done it. He had proven his dominance in the most spectacular fashion possible. The crowd erupted, and for a moment it seemed like Tyson had finally stepped out of Ali's shadow and into his own legendary status. But as the celebration continued around him, Tyson felt an unexpected emptiness. The victory, as decisive as it was, didn't bring the satisfaction he had anticipated. The questions from reporters afterward were the same ones he had heard countless times before. How did this performance compare to Ali's greatest moments? Was this the fight that finally established him as greater than the greatest? Each question felt like a reminder that no matter what he accomplished, Ali's presence would always loom over his career. In the weeks following the Spinks victory, Tyson's behavior became increasingly erratic. The pressure of maintaining his perfect record, combined with personal struggles and the constant comparisons to Ali, began to take their toll. His training sessions became more violent, his interviews more hostile, and his relationships more strained. Those closest to him watched with growing concern as the young champion seemed to be spiraling into a darkness that his boxing success couldn't illuminate. It was during this turbulent period that fate would intervene in the most unexpected way. Tyson was in Los Angeles for a promotional event when he received word that Muhammad Ali was in the same city, visiting a children's hospital. The news came from a reporter who was hoping to get Tyson's reaction to Ali's charitable work, perhaps expecting another inflammatory comment that would fuel their ongoing feud. But instead of the usual angry response, Tyson fell silent, his expression unreadable. Something compelled Tyson to drive to the hospital that evening. He told himself he was just curious, that he wanted to see what the has-been was up to, but deep down he knew there was more to it. As he sat in his car outside the medical center, watching through the windows, he saw something that would shake him to his core. There was Ali, moving slowly due to his advancing Parkinson's disease, sitting beside the bed of a young boy who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The child was clearly very ill, his small frame dwarfed by the hospital bed and medical equipment surrounding him. But his eyes were bright with excitement as Ali performed his famous magic tricks, making a handkerchief disappear and reappear, his hands trembling slightly but his smile genuine and warm. Tyson watched as Ali leaned in close to whisper something to the boy, and suddenly the child's face lit up with pure joy, his laughter echoing through the room despite his obvious pain. What happened next would be burned into Tyson's memory forever. The boy, with great effort, sat up in his bed and threw his thin arms around Ali's neck. The former champion, this man that Tyson had spent months vilifying, gently embraced the child, and Tyson could see tears streaming down Ali's face. Not tears of sadness, but tears of genuine love and compassion for a young soul, fighting a battle far more difficult than any boxing match. Tyson felt something break inside his chest as he witnessed this moment of pure humanity. Here was Muhammad Ali, the man he had called a has-been, the man he had sworn never to forgive, showing more courage and heart in this quiet hospital room than Tyson had ever seen in any boxing ring. The realization hit him like one of his own devastating uppercuts. He had been completely wrong about everything. As Ali prepared to leave the boy's room, he noticed a small crowd of hospital staff and other patients who had gathered in the hallway, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legend. Despite his obvious fatigue and the difficulty speaking that came with his condition, Ali took time with each person, signing autographs with shaking hands, taking pictures, and offering words of encouragement to patients and families facing their own battles. Tyson watched from the shadows as Ali approached a teenage girl in a wheelchair, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf that couldn't hide the effects of chemotherapy. When Ali knelt down to her level, the girl began to cry, telling him through her tears that she was scared and didn't know if she was strong enough to keep fighting. Ali took her hands in his and spoke softly, his voice barely above a whisper but filled with conviction. "You're already stronger than any champion I've ever known. Champions are made in moments like this, not in boxing rings." The words hit Tyson like a physical blow. He realized that everything he thought he knew about strength, about greatness, about what it meant to be a champion, had been completely backwards. Ali wasn't trying to steal his spotlight or diminish his achievements. Ali was operating on a level of greatness that Tyson had never even considered. This wasn't about boxing records or knockout percentages. This was about using whatever platform you had to make a difference in the lives of others. As Ali finally made his way toward the hospital exit, Tyson found himself stepping out of the shadows. Their eyes met across the lobby, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. Ali's expression showed no surprise, no anger, no judgment, just a gentle recognition, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. Tyson felt exposed, vulnerable, as if Ali could see straight through all his anger and bravado to the scared young man underneath. "Mike," Ali said simply, his voice soft but clear. That single word, spoken without malice or condescension, contained more power than any of Tyson's most devastating punches. It was an acknowledgement, an invitation, and a forgiveness all wrapped into one syllable. Tyson opened his mouth to speak, to apologize, to explain, but no words came. The weight of his own behavior, his harsh words, his stubborn pride, seemed to crush down on him all at once. Ali slowly approached, his movements deliberate and careful. When he reached Tyson, he placed a trembling hand on the young champion's shoulder. "I know what it's like," Ali whispered, his eyes filled with understanding. "The pressure, the expectations, the feeling that everyone wants a piece of you. I know what it's like to be young and angry and scared that you're not good enough." The words were like a key unlocking something deep inside Tyson's heart. "I never meant," Tyson began, his voice cracking with emotion. But Ali gently shook his head, stopping him mid-sentence. "You don't need to explain anything to me, son. I was young once too. I said things I regretted, did things I wish I could take back. The difference between a good man and a great man isn't whether you make mistakes, it's what you do after you realize you've made them." In that moment, standing in a hospital lobby surrounded by the quiet sounds of healing and hope, Mike Tyson felt something he hadn't experienced in years: peace. The anger that had consumed him for months began to dissolve, replaced by a profound respect for the man standing before him. He understood now that Ali's earlier comments hadn't been attacks on his character, but observations from someone who had walked the same difficult path and wanted to help guide him through it. "I want to learn," Tyson said quietly, the words surprising even himself. "I want to understand what real greatness looks like." Ali's face broke into that famous smile, the one that had charmed the world for decades, and Tyson felt like he was seeing it for the first time. "Then you're already on your way," Ali replied. "Real champions aren't made by the opponents they defeat. They're made by the lives they touch and the legacy they leave behind." As they walked out of the hospital together, Tyson felt like he was seeing the world through new eyes. The young patients and families they had left behind weren't just recipients of Ali's charity. They were his teachers, showing him what real courage looked like. Tyson realized that all his victories in the ring, all his knockouts and titles, meant nothing compared to the impact that one person could have on another's life, through simple acts of kindness and compassion. The two champions sat in Ali's car in the hospital parking lot, talking until the early hours of the morning. Ali shared stories from his own career, not the famous fights that everyone knew about, but the moments that had truly shaped him as a man. He talked about the mistakes he had made, the relationships he had damaged with his own pride and stubbornness, and the long journey he had taken to understand that true greatness had nothing to do with how hard you could hit, but how gently you could heal. Hey, my friends, help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Don't forget to click that hype button. It's super important because it helps the channel deliver content to more people. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth.